Hello. Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing? Who of you are solo arts and healers at the same day? Well, thank you for joining us. Tonight is the 7th night of the brand new MarshStream. We are doing things 7 nights a week at 7:30, different things each night. And we are doing things at 4 o'clock for youth programs, our youth programs every day, Monday through Friday. Let me tell you a little bit about what's coming up, and then we'll talk only about what we're here for today. So, tomorrow night is my show, Stephanie's MarshStream. And I will be interviewing and having a Q&A, and there will be excerpts with Josh Kornbluth. Josh Kornbluth was the very first person at the Marsh to do a full-length run. It was Haiku Tunnel. That was back in 1990, and since then he's been doing an enormous amount of things and changes over the years. And it's pretty much a Josh Kornbluth week on this first 10 days of MarshStream. So on Friday night, I guess you're all going to want to join us because we're going to have a Friday night MarshStream game. It's going to be bingo. It's also going to be with Josh Kornbluth. Like I said, it's his week. And following that, we're going to have his movie, his concert performance on Saturday and Sunday, which is The Mathematics of Change. Monday Night Marsh with 4 short performances. Tuesday next week is a sing-along. And Wednesday, we're back to Solo Arts Heal. So tonight, let's talk a little bit about what we're doing. We have a wonderful performance, excerpts by Joanna Rush, Sex and Power. It's the whole thing is moderated by Gail Schickele, and we're going to have a special guest, BRIGEE JACKSON. And I'm so glad Gail is here. Gail has brought me into the APAP solo performance fold. She runs an incredible room at APAP, and we have become friends because she's from here. And we have been doing APAP now. I did it for 3 years, and she does incredible stuff. So I wanna hand this over to Gail now, who will be hosting Solo Arts Heals. Thank you so much, Gail.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much for having me and the artists involved with Solo Arts Heal. I'm really thrilled to be launching Solo Arts Heal, and no better place than the breeding ground for solo performance for 30 years, the Marsh. Because while there are several medical centers and organizations involved in the realm of healing, around the healing power of the arts, the artists will be presenting in the coming weeks are themselves survivors, offering unique perspectives across a variety of medical and psychological issues. They're real life empowering stories, transformative experiences for audiences, and it's the theater of resilience that celebrates overcoming mental and physical life challenges that we hope offers hope and inspiration to our communities. And I'm honored to be working with these artists. We'll be seeing in the coming years. I see some of you in the audience, Valerie David, and next week on caregiving, Sam Simon, Adam Strauss, who's performed before at the Marsh with having to do with obsessive compulsive disorder, his show, The Mushroom Cure, which is a tremendously wonderful show. Rhonda Muzak in her show about sensory motor issues. And today, we'll be covering, so we're going to be covering a variety of topics from caregiving to cancer and so on. But tonight, appropriately, being Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and at a time when pains me to say there's a global upsurge of domestic violence against women and girls linked to the lockdown imposed by governments responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. We chose to address this issue, a most difficult issue, but while holding in our hearts and minds that survivors may be assured that there's advocacy things there, that you are not alone. You have support resources. We're going to be showing resources for tonight for survivors available in the chat. You'll be able to see as we talk tonight. And remember that art heals. And our offerings couldn't be more timely as we open our series tonight with playwright, actor, dancer, and choreographer Joanna Rush, who is going to be doing excerpts from her play Sex and Power. I want to just, I'm going to talk a little bit about more about Joanna before she does an excerpt from her play, Sex and Power. Hello, Joanna.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
So happy to have you here. And later in the show, we're going to be featuring Dr. BRIGEE JACKSON, who's the clinical counseling coordinator with BAYWAR, the Bay Area Women Against Rape, a nonprofit agency in Oakland. It was formed in 1971 and the first rape crisis center in the country. And a tremendous amount of good work being done with BAYWAR, and we're looking forward to bringing BRIGEE into the conversation. But first, we want to hear from Joanna Rush. And Joanna's show, Sex and Power, did showcase with us at the Association of Performing Arts Presenters conference and in our theater in New York in January. It probes the complexities of sex and power in today's fraught sexual landscape, drawing on diverse fields of knowledge and presented with the theatricality and humor honed by her years as a performer. Joanna offers hope that we can evolve as a society and heal our sorry state of sexual affairs. Her observational powers provide revelatory guidance for navigating the Me Too movement into healthy sexual territory for us all. Joanna also has an incredible background. Her play Kick was nominated for an off-Broadway OBA award, developed at New York Society for Ethical Culture, the Kirk Theater on Theater Row, Stocker Art Center in Ohio. Appearances include the Lincoln Center Atrium, Peter J. Sharp Theater at Playwright and Horizons, and more in New York City and the Boston area. She was chosen to perform sections of that play for International Women's Day, sponsored by the United Nations Council on the Empowerment of Women and the Hunger Project. Other plays include multi-character Home Sweet Homeland, Accidental Mummies, screenplays, Irish Whiskey, which was she co-authored and it won at the Temecula Valley Film Festival for Best Screenplay. She's been an actor on Broadway in Pouce Cafe, Shirley MacLaine at the Palace, A Chorus Line. She has been a rockette for years at the Radio City Music Hall, off-Broadway theater, and has upcoming film, many off-Broadway theater. I won't even list it all. We can talk about it more after. An upcoming film, The Glorious Resurrection of Claire Owen, Sunburn on the Cliffs, winner Best Short Comedy 2004, and Saying Goodbye. And in television, Shannon, Archie Bunker's Place, A Killing Affair, Cagney and Lacey, and Splendor in the Grass. So it's a thrill to have you here, Joanna. She's going to be doing an excerpt from her 75-minute play, Sex and Power. So I thank you for doing this excerpt. It's hard in the situation we're in. So let's just enjoy it and put our hands up for Joanna Rush in Sex and Power.
Four guys jumped over the wall on Central Park South and grabbed my date and made him watch while they raped me. We were 17. I had just moved to the city and made it into the Rockettes. The day after the rape, my Rockette sister, Laurel, helped me cover up the cuts and bruises with makeup. Oh, honey, don't cry. Oh, come on now. I know you're having a rough time. You think all men are like those creeps in the park? I don't know. Hell no. And the minute that curtain comes down, I want you to go right out there and report those little fuckers. They're just kids, Laurel. It could ruin their future. Are you kidding you? And besides, if you don't report it, it could happen to somebody else. One time, I was on a crowded number 11 bus on my way to an audition, and the guy next to me pressed up against me with the usual hard-on and started singing softly in my ear for everyone to hear. Some enchanted evening, you will meet a stranger across the crowded. And I'm really pretty shy, but I turned to him and belted, and somehow you'll know even then. He got off at the next stop, and I found a home in musical comedy, playing bad girls. But was I acting like a bad girl off stage as well as on? Because I experienced several other sexual assaults. What was wrong with me? In spite of my bad experiences with men, I wanted to have a family. So I got married and had a baby, a boy baby. I was aware that as a white boy, he would be automatically privileged. A sense of entitlement could cause him and everyone around him damage. I regret the times his father or I told him no, and we let him do what he wanted anyway. Were we planting the seeds for entitlement? Yes. But more importantly, we were teaching him how he could safely ignore the word no. One day, he wanted to take a short walk to the center of town. And I said, okay, but I can't carry you up the hill. We made an agreement that he would walk both ways. He walked all the way there and almost all the way back. When we got to the foot of the hill in our block, he said, carry me. No, we have an agreement. Carry me. No. Carry me. No. I sat on the neighbor's lawn, refusing to give in. I was so proud of myself. My husband thought I was crazy. I was crazy. I took pride in my ability to move on, but I could never stop thoughts from those past events from haunting me and wondering why those men had subjected me to such violence. Why did those guys rape me? What drove them? How were they capable of it? Was it a genetic relic from our primitive past? Was it this culture that's been shaped by men? These men did not seem to see me as a human being. Was it a right brain, left brain thing? Or was it a matter of pathology? The human population includes psychopaths and sociopaths. Not much you can do about that, unless you have a functional MRI machine and know how to use it. The amygdala is the part of the brain where emotions originate. In an fMRI image, a healthy amygdala looks like an almond. If the guy you're with looks more like a walnut, get the hell out of there. But if you don't have $1 million for an fMRI machine, then it pays to be aware of your date's resting heart rate and blood pressure. If they're a little on the low side, he may need extra stimulation. Like if you'd be satisfied seeing a horror film, he may need actual horror. If, as they say, 1% of the population is psychopathic, I probably dated him. I just had no idea how to tell who it was safe to be with. It seems rape can have long-term effects: PTSD, vertigo, tinnitus, vocal problems. My voice teacher pointed out how closely the vocal cords resemble the vagina. Vocal cords. Vocal cords. Just seeing that connection gave me deeper respect for my instrument. What I hear repeatedly from survivors of sexual assault is that what gives them comfort is being able to tell their story, be listened to, and be believed. At one talkback, a young man raised his hand and asked, "How should I treat someone who's been raped?" A young woman stood up and told him, "Just listen." During the Kavanaugh hearings, I reached out to friends who I knew had been raped. It was shocking to realize there were so many of us. So I don't know why I was surprised and frankly devastated when I came across a Reuters list of the 10 most dangerous countries for women. Number 10 is the United States of America, right after 8 and 9, Yemen and Nigeria. Holy shit, how did I not know that? What conditioning have I undergone that I would be shocked at that? The truth is that even as a privileged white woman, I lived in fear from the time I hit puberty to the time I became a grandmother, right here in our exceptional country. I thought it was just me. I felt like I was a stain on our shining city on the hill. I just worked harder and harder to become a better person. I'd become numb to the violence. Back in the 70s, I was cast as the only woman among a group of gamblers held hostage in a Las Vegas men's room. On the first day of rehearsal, the leading actor, a hot new star whom I had not yet met, greeted me by wrapping his arms around me and throwing us both to the ground. In Hollywood culture of the time, a guy with a little bit of power could get away with all kinds of stuff. Women had a certain power also, screwing men for jobs and getting them. My manager, Estelle, was all for it. Listen, Toots, it's not going to kill you, and I know the perfect guy. Loves redheads, adores dances. I don't think so. He's smart, he's rich, has a development deal at Paramount. No, listen, he's totally trustworthy. I could vouch for him. How do you know that? He's my husband. I can't do that. And why not? Because I'm Catholic. Yeah, right. Go ahead. Do things your way. You'll wind up with a writer. We don't have adequate language for talking about sexual violence. Many brave souls are speaking out anyway. Each story can lead to the healing. Each step in the direction of truth could lead us to, I don't know, sexual sanity? At one college, we met these beautiful young women who told me they'd had abstinence only or no sex education at all. They were anguished, in knots, desperate to know the truth about the nature of sexuality. Obviously, many young men have even less education and more twisted information than the girls. Men make up a surprising number of survivors I meet. I think men have a harder time admitting they're victims of sexual violence. The shame they feel is complicated by the assault on what they've learned to think of as the core of their masculinity. I have grave concerns for their well-being, whether we're talking about victims or perpetrators. The demand on boys to be a man is tough on a human with feelings. How could the men who raped me see me as a human being if they were operating without that essential aspect of their humanity? Masculine emotion, including crying, was acceptable through the 19th century in this country. It only seemed to change around the time of World War I. Recruitment posters finally defined the requirements for masculinity. The United States Army builds men. The masculine man had to be religious, hardworking and handy, well-built, Christian and white with weapons. The Army was used as a model of what American men should be and how to judge men in general. In today's world, men who were raised in the image of that macho role model, men whose value had been calculated by their net worth, or who had been objectified as workers and then used up and spit out, men who've lost a sense of purpose, are bound to be frustrated and angry and feel disconnected. And when men feel alienated and less socially dominant, they have a deeper need for recognition. And that's when being a man manifests itself most violently, primitively, as violence. I picture those 4 young men who raped me the first time. They were very young. Maybe it was peer pressure. Were they trying to live up to their idea of what it was to be a man? I'll never know. But I want to prevent the next generations from going through the trauma. I want to get to the root of the problem. Gore Vidal said this about getting to the root of anything. If you want to get to the root of something, you must be radical. The word radical even comes from the Latin word for root. He went on to say, quote, from a barbaric Bronze Age text known as the Old Testament, 3 anti-human religions have evolved: Judaism, Christianity, Islam. These are sky god religions. They are literally patriarchal. God is the omnipotent father, hence the loathing of women for 2,000 years in those countries afflicted by the sky god and his earthly male delegates. Now, I'm an interfaith minister. In seminary, I was full of respect for the teachings of these religions. Do unto others, love your neighbors as yourself. But honestly, they have all failed to give us a unifying vision of the world. The mystical traditions of these religions do teach love, not dogma. The body, nature is seen as sacred. The Iroquois, the Hopi, the Manangabal people of Indonesia are cultures that all have had gender equality. And what do these cultures have in common? They had little or no incidents of rape. I relate to ancestors from those earlier cultures. My greats, Dorinda and Irving. I just found out from one of those DNA tests that I'm more Neanderthal than most people. They hunted and fished together, shared child-rearing chores, had great sex. Look how happy they were. While the men stayed home in their man caves, the women traveled looking for sexual partners. They knew this was a way to prevent inbreeding and to have fun. Look at Dorinda. And Irving doesn't seem to mind at all. Oh, if Dorinda was traveling, then Irving must have had visitors too. Huh. So somewhere around my 34th year in therapy, I decided it was time for me to meet the challenge of being in a successful relationship with a man, like Dorinda was. I met one. He was funny and kind, and he wanted a relationship with a woman, but he wasn't my type. Not my type. What was I thinking? I thought about all the really good men to whom I'd never given the time of day, never listened to or cared about. I got sucked into the whole manufactured idea of what it is to be a man. And I thought about all the really good men that I shied away from when I was unworthy and feeling like damaged goods. I got sucked into the whole manufactured idea of what it is to be a woman. Today's generation, today's students are much more open. They're much more accepting of each other, of the masculine and feminine traits in each other. At our local March for Our Lives demonstration, a teenager gave a speech, his voice cracking with pubescent ardor. I was especially moved when he reached out to boomers and beyond and said, "Thank you to those on whose shoulders we stand." When he said thank you, and included us. I felt sad thinking about the world we were leaving him, that in spite of all of our years of activism, we were still not leaving our kids a better world. Now I'm thinking, okay, but we are leaving the world better kids. That was the guy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanna. That was wonderful.
Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Oh, yes. And just as you end that, we are leaving our world better kids, and that's just incredibly moving. And it's such a brave and powerful story that you share of your life. Uh, how did you come to write this particular story, especially after Kick? Tell us a little bit about that and how those two kind of interacted in your life.
Yeah. You would think that after Kick, I would be finished with the subject of rape, but and Rockettes and religion. But I toured colleges with Kick. Well, and also we played off Broadway and other places. And the audience always told me their stories, and they're always heart wrenching. But
Tell us a little bit about Kick.
Kick is what's really great. Kick is character driven, and it's really a play. It's a solo play, and I play 13 characters, and there's 34 music and sound cues, and it's a powerful piece. Lynn Taylor Corbett directed, and she was nominated for a Tony for, I forget. Oh, it was a great show, and now I forget the name of it. I'm just blanking. But anyway, Lynn and I toured colleges, and we would do talkbacks after. And then I wrote the book Kick. And then at the book signings, people would tell me their stories. This was before Me Too. Lynn calls it the Me Too of 15 years ago, which was when I started developing that. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't. When my parents were alive, I was afraid to put it out there, and my parents passed, and I still had one aunt who was living to. She lived to 101, but I was kind of waiting. But she kind of knew what my life was like anyway.
So
my life has been beautiful.
The chorus line, really, for a dancer and performer.
Yeah, I only lasted at Radio City for a year, and then I worked on Broadway and off Broadway. Chorus line was amazing. Yeah, but why I did this particular piece now is that the last college I played before I started writing this, these young women told me their stories, and one of them was she had been raped, she had been kidnapped and raped every day in captivity, and now was afraid of being deported. And so with Kick, people would tell their stories. It gave them permission space to tell their stories, and a lot of them did for the first time in their lives. But after these young people, and a young man also, but this woman, and then being afraid, they were working hard to stay in college, and they're afraid of being deported. So I said, I have to do something more. I have to get to the bottom of it, like I say in these few minutes. And so that's why I wrote this, was, can I find out anything that could prevent it from happening in the first place?
That's so. In fact, I remember you saying there was a man in an audience at Kick that said that through the performance, he recognized that he actually had done rape?
Yeah.
You know, that's
Uh,
powerful to
it
have.
was very, yeah. And I really hope to engage men in this conversation because also a fraternity changed their mission statement in the kick audience, changed their mission statement to include respect for women. That was like huge.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
the whole fraternity was there. And that was, there are just so many wonderful things that have happened from
Mhm.
doing that.
Well, thank you again. I think for the conversation, shall we bring in BRIGEE? And I want to say a little bit about BRIGEE Jackson, who is a native of Oakland, California, and has told us she's always had a passion for serving others and working toward greater understanding of self and others. That she currently works as the clinical counseling coordinator for Baywar and supports survivors of sexual violence through advocacy, education, and intervention. And it's your hope to continue uplifting and empowering survivors by creating a space for them to be authentically witnessed. Welcome, BRIGEE. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Thank you. That was so wonderful, Joanna. I'm so privileged to have been able to, pardon me, to have been able to witness that and to just join you all in having this conversation. As you mentioned earlier, Gail, it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And how important and how relevant of a time than now to be, putting events like this together to spotlight the stories of survivors that have oftentimes gone untold and unheard. And so I'm really grateful to be here with all of you this evening.
Thank you. Thank you. So do tell us, I think, how can we support survivors? There's so many questions and around this. Where should we begin?
Sure. I mean, it's a huge question, and it's something that I can talk about for hours. It's my job to talk about it. But I think something that actually came up during the performance piece that Joanna mentioned was that someone had stood up in the audience after being asked, what do I do if someone says this to me, or if I find out that this has happened. And the woman said, just listen. And I thought that was so powerful because a lot of times we get caught up and I'm speaking generally, this may not apply to everyone, but I think there is a tendency for folks to feel like I have to do something, I have to say something, I have to try and fix this or even fix this person. And I like to empower folks and encourage folks to sort of pump the brakes on the doing and to focus on just being there, which involves, active and reflective listening, which involves, meeting folks where they are in the moment, whether that's needing an ear to listen, whether that's needing, to dance it out or cry it out, whether that's some resources, but really opening up and listening and not getting ahead of the survivor and their needs, I think is huge.
Yes. What does one say to someone that when they tell you that they've been sexually assaulted? That is something that is a very difficult situation. We want to be helpful, but listening would be the most important thing we could do. Um,
Yeah.
and again, I want to remind people that we have information listed for safety apps. That's maybe we could talk a little bit about the safety apps too. That's something new besides just the hotlines. Also, that we can talk about for people that may be in need. And
Sure. Definitely. I want to add before jumping into the safety apps, if I may, just another thing to be mindful of is if someone does disclose is expressing gratitude that they trusted you with this part of themselves, with this piece of their story, because it is personal. You know, it's a personal assault, and it's a spiritual assault. And so to open up and give that information, to share that information, to ask someone else to hold it is a huge request, but it's also a huge privilege for the person who's on the receiving end of that. So simply saying thank you for sharing that with me, you know, and acknowledging that that may have been a difficult conversation to have, I think is also really important when dealing with a survivor. And the safety apps, jumping into that, there's some really cool and helpful apps that can be downloaded on the computer. They can also be downloaded on Android and Apple devices. There's a couple of names popping up in the chat screen, if in the chat box, if folks are interested in learning about that. But they are, there's one called Aspire News app, and it actually looks like a newspaper, like the front page of a newspaper. That's what the icon looks like. So it doesn't necessarily draw the attention like this is something, you know, that I'm looking for support around, you know, abuse or violence that I'm experiencing. And so you can open up the app. There's options to program in emergency contacts. There's options to program in very short messages, help, come to my house, I'm in danger, you know, alert mom, whatever the sort of message is, there's a way that you can sort of go into this inconspicuous looking app and be in contact with your support circle and the folks who, you know, you may have entrusted with the knowledge that violence is happening. So really great for teens and folks who are, you know, that have, you know, access to those devices as another means of support.
Now you have programs that are specifically for teenagers, and tell us a little bit about that. That must be, right now, here we are in COVID and we're in lockdown. And I understand there's really a great increase in domestic violence. I'm afraid that's also in sexual violence.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some of the coping things? How do we deal with that right now in terms of lockdown and
Yeah,
recognizing that, and also maybe helping people? That's a challenge
sure.
right now.
Sure. A little about our programs that we have that support youth and teens. We have a sexually exploited minors program that supports folks who are oftentimes they are in custody within the juvenile justice system and have been referred to our office through the district attorney. Sometimes they're referred through family members and other service providers. And so folks at our agency go and advocate for them at court. They advocate for them in school with their families, just to make sure that they have a space that they can process what's going on for them. And even while they're in custody, to have someone to check in with and make sure that they know that they're not alone, that they have someone who, you know, has their back throughout this process and can sort of act as a middle person to some degree between these larger systems that the youth and the young adults are, you know, a part of. We also have a wonderful group space called the Safe Place Alternative, or we call it the SPA for short. Unfortunately, it's not like a spa where you can get manicures and facials and things. Working on that. But it is a really cool place for teens to come and just kind of drop in and hang out. There's, you know, there's activities, there's different conversations that are had there, and it's not therapy. So, you know, with the hope that kids will feel invited to come into a space and not feel the pressure that they have to talk, they have to share, but that they can just be with like-minded individuals, be with adults who are safe. And so those are some of the things that are going on, particularly at BayWar. And so you all can check out our website, baywar.org, for more information. And that's BAWAR, no Y, to just have more information about our particular program. And then getting to the sort of the other side of your question around the increase of violence that's occurring and sort of, what can we do or how can we support folks who are, being sheltered in place with individuals who are causing them harm, because that is a real, it's a real thing that's happening. And sort of to piggyback on those safety apps, those are incredible resources that folks can use, and none of the information is actually saved to your phone. So if you were engaged in a chat with a counselor, if you were engaged in sending a message to one of those safe people because something is happening, it wouldn't be able to be accessed. It doesn't get saved to your phone like your text messages or other sort of messaging apps. And so that's something, to encourage folks to kind of look and see if any of those apps will resonate, and especially also considering if they have access to a phone or some type of device, because sometimes those things are taken away as a form of abuse. So that is still one option. And then I think there's a really cool infographic that an agency, a local agency here in California, created. And it's sort of a map of safety planning, some safety planning tips. And so that's something that we want to encourage folks to do, is be thinking about things like the safest rooms in the house. If something starts to escalate, is there a space that you can go into the house, lock the door, and kind of have some distance between you and the person who's causing harm? Are there code words that you can use, or even gestures that might be able to be used? Say, for instance, if there's, two adults in the house and there's children, something that the adult can tell the child is, when I tug on my ear like this, that means to go to the safest room in the house. And having these conversations with children. Some folks tend to shy away from having those conversations, of course, because they don't want to traumatize or overload, a kid's system. But it can actually be really beneficial to safety if the children are involved in those conversations in a way that, is appropriate for them, because we're trying to look out for everyone's safety involved.
Mm-hmm. That's really helpful. That's good to know, and that's an important skill to be able to have and to help to protect the kids.
Definitely.
Yeah. You talked also about normalizing and validating trauma responses, because PTSD, rape trauma syndrome. What are the things to look for, and why do we react this way?
Yeah. Well, I first want to say that no response or reaction to trauma, whether that's divorce, sexual violence, natural disaster, whatever type of trauma it is, there's not a single or a standardized way that individuals will move through that. So it can look and feel a bunch of different ways for folks. And yet there are some common themes that occur, and some common signs and symptoms, as you were saying, that can occur for folks. And I think the first thing that comes to mind is their engagement and participation with their community, even if their community is small, even if it's just one other person? Are they still engaging in conversation, or are they tending to isolate more or withdraw more from that interaction? Are they finding interest, still in the things that used to provide them joy? If they did art, if they danced, if they walked, if they painted, if they sang, are these still things that they're able to access that can provide them a sense of joy? Or is it difficult for them to access those pleasurable emotions? Those are things that we can look for. What are their thoughts? What are the things that they're actually saying?
Mhm.
Suicidal ideation, self-harming thoughts can oftentimes be very passive, and can sort of fly under the radar. But are we hearing things like, I just can't do this anymore? I just, want to go to sleep and never wake up again? Are we hearing, I just can't get it together and it would be better off if I wasn't, here? Things like that, that sometimes we can think, oh, they're just kind of stressed, or, they're just kind of talking. Those are things that we want to sort of keep our eyes and ears out for. And it doesn't always mean that something is going to escalate to the point of attempting, self-harming behaviors or suicidal behaviors. But we do want to be there to ask, hey, I'm noticing. I'm noticing this is going on, or I'm not noticing this is going on. And I just want to check in with you to see, how are you doing? And again, listening, and deferring to what comes up when that individual is asked.
So taking that normalization, validation of trauma responses and using it to understand the current mental, emotional, and physical state and
Right.
expectations during the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, it's sometimes folks understand their, like, the activation that they have around a particular experience. So if someone has experienced sexual violence and, they see something on a TV show that reflects this, then they may have some activation because it's something that's directly connected to their experience. And for a lot of folks, or for some folks, I should say, they're able to sort of connect. Oh, this makes sense that I'm having this reaction because I just saw something that directly reminds me of what I've been through. But in situations like this, folks are having their trauma reactions are coming up. They're starting to feel hypervigilant. They're maybe not able to sleep as well. They're having difficulty concentrating and different things like this. And it's not necessarily connected to their sexual violence. And so it feels very disconnected. Why is this happening? What's wrong with me? And what folks have to be taught is that trauma is trauma, right? No matter what sort of flavor, I like to call it, trauma it is, it can still bring up those same sort of reactions. There's still a sense of loss. There's still a sense of out of controlness going on with this COVID-19 situation, having to be sheltered in place, not being able to stick to routines that are really helpful. Folks' access to medication is being impacted. Lives are being lost. And so it is a completely normal reaction to have anxiety, to have worry, to have fear, to sort of be feeling, waves of depression come on and things like that. And so we want to educate ourselves as providers, and also to educate survivors and let them know, no, you're not crazy. Because this can be such a crazy making process, but no, you're not crazy. All of this is a normal and natural response to trauma and activation.
Joanna, you must have certainly experienced some of that just with the PTSD and the stress that comes from the situations that you have found yourself in, as that you so bravely show us in your performances.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear Dr. Jackson explain that, because when um I also was in 9/11 across the street, so I have I have a lot of compound. I don't know if there's a technical name, PTSD. I mean, I have the sexual violence one, but then
But
there's
you
then
lived across the street from the World Trade Center when it went off, and part of it landed on your building, did it not? You thought it was a bomb going off?
right. We thought it was a bomb. We were in black and we were evacuated, and
Wow.
so that was a feeling of loss of control, and that was. There was that, and I wrote a play about that. I write about such wonderful things. But it's funny. It's a funny play. Um, there's that, but then I was rehearsing in New York as up until Friday the 13th of March, and it felt like everything was closing in. And I was supposed to fly back to Florida, but I couldn't get on the plane again. And I rented a car and I drove home to Massachusetts. And when I got here, I mean, and I really went through like depressed, and I couldn't move. I wasn't dancing or doing anything. And I think what triggered this is it felt like the beginning of the AIDS crisis all over again. My friends were dying right and left, and the federal government was doing nothing to help. And that's what was that was the hardest thing to deal with in the beginning of this
Yeah.
COVID thing.
Yeah.
And I found that this sounds crazy. I mean, I couldn't sing, I couldn't dance, I couldn't do anything. But I watched I watched Andrew Cuomo, our governor of New York, and it was like I watched his press conference, when he does them every day, and I'm just hearing the truth and seeing the truth and what it really is, and then having someone talk about the love part of it. New
Mhm.
York tough, but it's because we're smart and we're strong, and that's been really healing for me. And I know at other times when PTSD has kicked in, I've gone to other things, mostly
Mhm.
the arts, but this has been my kind of crutch through this episode so far.
Yeah. And
A
it
nice man.
shifts. It shifts and it changes. Some things that serve us in one season of our lives, may shift and turn into something different in another season of our lives. And I think that's where that self-compassion comes in, and the willingness to explore, things that we may not have tried before, which is incredibly hard to do when you've directly or indirectly, experience trauma. Because PTSD, or reactions to trauma, even if it's not a full-on clinical diagnosis of PTSD, right, doesn't only happen to people who are directly impacted. It happens to folks around, right? And we
Yeah.
see that now where I'm so grateful and I'm blessed to have my health and my strength right now, but I'm also so aware that there are sick people, there are people dying, losing their lives, losing their jobs, being really impacted. And I'm absorbing that energy, right? I'm absorbing that knowledge. And so how do we continue to take care of ourselves
As
while
caregivers.
Yeah.
taking care, of each other?
Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yes, and meditation and breathing and the healing power of the arts. It's so true. You both have, you're the embodiment of it, Joanna, and you've talked about it too, Brigitte. It is wonderful and to see how much outreach there is in the arts community right now, giving
Yeah.
free concerts and free dance. You can do free, dance online and Zoom. We're all Zooming.
I'm doing Zumba on Zoom. I don't know why she hasn't advertised it as Zumba. Yeah.
And dancing and classes and all kinds of wonderful things and I think we are working together as communities, and it's very heartening because it's hard on all of us. And I think I worry sometimes, how do you recognize now around the country, because of the horrors of human trafficking, in all the buses and in all the pharmacies, there are a list of what to look for if somebody might be a victim, or I should say, or survivor,
Mhm.
and of human trafficking. And what are those things we might be able to look for to help somebody? And even sometimes just reaching out or helping someone with an idea that has to do with something in the arts, just for dancing and shows. All of these I think are truly um,
Mhm.
healing resources that
Yeah.
we have, and we can all take part in. So I'm really
Yeah.
glad that we can all work together on Solo Art Heals, and uh, and remind each other of that. May I ask you, is there anything else, Joanna, that you would like to add here before we have to close? I'm afraid.
Just what's coming up for me about the arts, and that's I do attribute my mental health and everything to my work in the arts. But I was remembering that early on, when I first went to New York, my voice teacher, I was crying one day. It was really a mess. And I couldn't stop crying. And I had a voice lesson, and I showed up, but I said, I can't do this. And he made me do my whole lesson through the crying. And it was the most healing, wonderful thing. Um,
Absolutely.
just yeah, just doing it. Yeah.
Mhm. I love that. I think, it can be incredibly difficult to face our feelings, our emotions, especially when they're on the side of sadness, hurt, anger, frustration, on that side of things. And something that was told to me throughout different moments of my life was that, um, you're going to have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I struggled with that for so long. What do you mean? Like I deserve comfort.
Oh yeah.
But it dawned on me that, to be able to sit with, as Joanna was just describing, those feelings, and to not run away from them, but to sit with them, and find these creative ways, like performing, like dancing, like painting, like singing, like skateboarding, whatever it is,
Exactly.
to sort of channel and find the release for those things, because otherwise it all gets trapped. It all just gets trapped within our body and is looking for these, pockets of release. And so I'm thankful for you for sharing that example, because I think it can be a really great teaching tool, for folks.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I thank you both so very much. And we want to continue with our healing arts. So Solo Arts Heal in the coming weeks. I'm very grateful to both of you for participating today. Joanna, the wonderful performance. I'm very grateful to you for that. And BRIGEE Jackson, continue your wonderful good work. I do want to announce that next week we're going to have Sam Simon in the actual dance. He presents a preview of his award-winning show, The Actual Dance, which is the real-life story of a husband who confronts the anticipated loss of his wife to advance breast cancer. And that's Sam's own story, how he prepares for the unthinkable. And it has a happy ending, and it's full of love and resilience. And he has been a wonderful part of our Art Heals group, and I'm very much looking forward to Sam next week. And we'll have a schedule listed up of the coming weeks with other performers on the Marsh website soon. So I want to thank you, and I hand it now back over to Stephanie. We're going to close the evening, and also I want to thank the incredible crew. You guys
Brian,
are awesome so much.
Brian and Daniel and Seth, thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's
Yeah.
Stephanie, thank you.
Well, here we are, our first Solo Arts Heal. And thank you so much. What an incredible conversation. What a wonderful performance, Joanna. Just really heartfelt and thoughtful, and what a great start to this series. Thank everyone so much. And hopefully you all can see some of the art here on MarshStream, and hopefully that'll be healing through this highly PTSD time. So keep tuning in. I also want to mention, when you were talking about all that stuff, I forgot to mention that on Friday at 12 o'clock, we're having our first singing and fitness class together. A voice lesson and fitness. So 12 o'clock on Friday. Join us. I think that's helpful. Get a little exercise and singing, vocal exercise, body singing. And that's with Candace Johnson. We're really thrilled about that. And we're going to have.
And Candace is part of our group in New York. That's fabulous. That's a wonderful show. Yeah.
So lots of things coming up. And if you want, our tip jar is open. Support MarshStream, support the performers and programs like this, because we have no ticket sales at the Marsh right now, and we are about 70% ticket sales at the Marsh. So anyway, thank you all. This was wonderful. Thank you. And come watch my interview tomorrow night with Josh Kornbluth. Come do bingo. Come see films, solo performance concerts, and healing. Thank you.
We will.
Thank you.